get away with stuff. But isn't that good? Because if you got away with stuff, then you just keep on doing bad stuff.
For sure, it just takes a bit of effort to come before God in that space.
No, it doesn't.
No, not really. It's pretty easy.
It takes more effort to sin than it does to come towards God without sin.
But if you really want your sin, you might find it a bit confronting.
I guess that's it.
That's it. So even the way you state it is interesting, because it's sort of like saying, oh, it's really hard to be a loving person. No, it's not. It's not hard to be a loving person. God designed you in a six-sphere state from the beginning. That was your natural state, to be a loving person. Do you understand? So the natural state is the easiest state. To be a six-sphere loving person is the easiest thing you could do.
Yeah, and I guess this leads me into another question, and that is...
I haven't answered the last one.
Oh, sorry, go on. Sorry. No, and well, this has been on my mind because I have an attempt to be sincere, and
Okay, well,
there's no such
you
thing.
can't attempt to be sincere.
Okay.
Well, because that's insincere.
That's insincere. You've got to develop sincerity, and when you have it, it's sincere. But if you try to be sincere, you are insincere.
That's facade.
Yeah, it's better off.
You were going to say.
Because this is the way I sort of experience it or feel it, is that if I have the feeling like I don't want to be in this addiction, and I want to love in this instance, well, I often would feel then the pain of not getting my addiction, and it's like wow, that's pretty full on pain. And
see, stop there. This is where you're going all wrong for.
Yeah.
Okay. Not getting your addiction met is not full on pain.
Or seeing the truth of myself.
That's not full on pain either. Seeing the truth of yourself is a pleasure. Can you see your attitude is very much the opposite? Your attitude is getting out of addiction is hard. No, it's not. It's really easy.
Addiction
Being in an addiction is really hard.
makes life very
Makes
hard.
life very hard. Getting out of it's really easy. Feeling your pain is really easy.
So I understand that to a degree, because
No.
does it just feel like I'm willpowering it only?
No, you're not even willpowering it. You're basically convinced in your heart that if you do not meet an addiction, it's going to hurt like hell. You're convinced in your heart that meeting an addiction brings pleasure, not pain.
Yeah.
You're convinced in your heart that all of your pain has some other magical reason for existing other than your addictions. When actually the truth is all the pain you have is because of your addictions. But you're convinced that it's because of something else. Right? And this is the problem you have, is that you keep on thinking and feeling. Your faith is set saying, if I meet my addictions, I'll be happy. And I'm saying to you, Paul, fundamental issue here. If you meet your addictions, you will be unhappy. You are guaranteed unhappiness meeting your addictions.
And I feel I'm getting that to some degree.
No.
You don't feel anything.
No. You're completely convinced in your heart that meeting your addictions will bring you happiness.
Yeah, and the pain in quotations that you're describing when you make a decision intellectually, I don't want this addiction, that is really the pain of I want this addiction and I'm not getting it. That's not the...
That's the tantrum.
That's the
internal going against my real...
Yeah, your will is set saying, I want my addiction.
Yeah, and it's the good thing. It's the pleasurable thing. And remember, we know addictions are there to help us avoid existing pains, or because we have entitlements, one of the two. But that existing pain is not what you are connecting to when you're not meeting an addiction in this state that you're describing.
No.
You are just describing, oh, I really want my addiction and it hurts that I'm not getting it. Not, oh, I was trying to do all these things to avoid this pain, this other belief that I had inside of me. That's when you really don't want your addiction, that's what will start happening. You will feel the pain
Maybe an example would be.
driving the addiction. Oh gosh, I do that to you too, don't I? What is an example?
Well, let's look at your addiction to get things done fast
Yeah.
without much consideration of the environment or anything else. So what's driving that?
I want to feel a sense of worth, that I'm worthwhile, and
That you've accomplished something.
yes,
Yeah, so you fundamentally don't want to feel that you haven't accomplished something.
yes.
Can I also add, there's another feeling.
Don't get too...
Oh yeah,
stuck with that.
okay, I got it.
You gotta
Just do the principle.
Example,
Yeah,
example.
the simplicity.
Yeah, so what's the example?
No, that's it.
Right. So what's gonna... So your addiction is saying, this is how I get my worth. So to actually stop this addiction, what are you going to have to do?
To feel
That you have no worth.
that, yes, and be conscious of that when I work, so as I don't work in that addiction,
Well, you're probably working as soon as you start working, you're in that addiction probably.
pretty much.
You might have to stop working
Yes, yes.
for a while.
Yeah, and that often happens. Something goes wrong and I get angry and then...
Oh, well, no, that's not the same thing. See, something goes wrong and you get angry. You're only stopping work because you're angry,
Well,
not to feel your lack of worth.
yeah, but that can lead me to that.
No, it doesn't, because you're angry. Angry is going to keep you angry.
So to want to go under that.
There's no under that. There's no under that. Anger is a desire to avoid the thing. So there's no under it. There's no... to get angry, you're going to have to go through anger completely, not get under it. You can't get under it. It's there because you wanted to avoid what's under it. You're not going to get under it. You understand? No? No? You're not understanding some fundamental principles about how to deal with things. This is what I feel. Right? You think you understand here, but you have no understanding here about how to actually deal with things. And this is something we notice a lot about people who have heard divine truth for a long time, is you think you understand it here, and there's no understanding here yet. Like, fundamental principle. Your anger is a choice to avoid what's under it. Right?
Yes.
So feel the choice.
If you feel the free will desire, I do not
I
want.
do not want to feel what's under it. See, what you're trying to do is you're trying to go, I want to feel what's under it.
Yes.
So get under the anger.
Yes.
Crap.
You
The
and
anger
mine-
is there because you don't want to feel what's under it.
Yeah, and you and mine.
So feel that. You don't want to go there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, and so a lot of my pain and frustration is trying to willpower it, trying to jump to this place instead of being true to my real feelings that I don't want to. Going from I don't want to.
That's right.
Yeah.
You do not want to go through some specific feelings that are going to be, you think are going to be too hard to go through. But I'm saying to you, your addictions are harder. And you don't believe that. You believe your addictions are easier. But your addictions are going to bring you more pain, more suffering, longer pain. You're going to die in them if you're not careful. And you're going to be in the spirit world in the same place in your addictions, causing more pain and more suffering to yourself and others. And it's all happening because it's harder to live a life of addiction than it is to live a life free of it. But you think it's easier to live a life of addiction than live a life free of it.
Yeah.
That's one of your corrupt faiths.
Yes.
You feel that addictions are just a lot easier.
Yeah. And I'm unwilling to have that fight about or that struggle to see the truth of myself. That's what I really want. I sort of want to
Not
believe.
just that, you're unwilling to go through the feelings of what's driving your behaviour.
Okay. Yes.
This is what creates the anger. You're unwilling to go through the feelings.
Yeah.
Right? So the feelings are like deep sense of a lack of personal worth unless you accomplish something. In other words, feel like you have no worth unless you accomplish something. You also have no worth unless you're in a relationship with a woman. No worth. Right? You don't want to feel those two things. Those two things at the moment are driving almost every choice, every decision, every action you take. Those are driven by those two things. It's so uneconomical because every single action taken and every decision made driven by those two things is just causing you more pain and suffering in the longer run, and it will cause a longer run than a shorter one, by the way, because you keep engaging the addiction, believing the addiction is going to satisfy the sad emotion. It's just going to cause more pain and suffering, the addiction. It's harder to live in addiction than it is to live without them. But the average person doesn't believe that. They believe it's easier. But it's harder. It's harder because it's going to end up longer, harder, more difficult, more pain, more suffering, more rage, more resistance, and also no relationship with God. It's going to be harder. Makes sense, Paul?
And that's something we talked about in 2019, wasn't it? About measuring the pain. A lot of us don't measure the pain. We're just in a frenzy of I need the addiction, but we're not actually measuring how much pain living in this. It's very cyclical, and it's just accruing more pain.
Yeah, so we've seen you in the time we've known you. You've engaged 2 or 3 relationships. Every single one of them is with the same type of woman. It causes you the same type of pain. And in the end, you're not satisfied. You never are satisfied in the relationship. And yet you keep going back to the same kind of woman and getting the same kind of pain every single time. And well, I've seen you do that for 15 years. Right? Now, that's not going to continue. That's going to continue. It's not going to change unless you see that meeting your addiction is causing you pain. At the moment, you think it's causing you pleasure. And you think it's hard to give it up. It's not hard to give it up. It's harder to do it and bear the consequence of doing it. It's a lot harder. You end up, honestly, Paul, you could actually be with your soulmate by now if you had followed God's way 15 years ago. Generally, if a person is very, very sincere, they usually can reach a 4th or 5th sphere condition in 15 years, if they're very sincere. And if they're sincere and have reached that condition, they would definitely draw their soulmate to themselves in that time. Right? God designed it to work. Yep. So you could be with your soulmate by now, but not with the addictions you currently have. Yeah. And God's saying, I can't let you be with your soulmate, really. In a way, when I say let, it's not like God's going, I'm going to make your life hard. It's like it's not good for Paul to meet his soulmate in his current condition, because he's just going to cause a terrible havoc in that relationship if he does. Right? But Paul's convinced that his addictions are going to lead him there. And until that conviction changes, you're not going to change. So you are frequently convinced, Paul, that you understand what you need to do, but what I see is that you do not want to feel hard emotion. You do not want to feel them. You want to do everything you possibly can to avoid a hard emotion, and yet the hard emotions are going to be the most economical way to deal with the problem. You have, over the time of the last 15 years, I've seen you in many hard emotions, most of which have been caused by your own addiction.
And at the moment, like going through these I don't want to's, it sounds like.
Well, not really. You can say I don't want to for the next 100 years and you won't want to at the end of it. So what's going to change that?
You need to face that you don't want to.
Yeah.
And why.
But that's the important point is why. You say you don't want to, but you're not looking at the real reasons why. The real reasons are you've got some hard emotions to deal with about worth that you do not want to go through. Right? You just don't want to go through them. If you chose to go through them, you could be over them in a year or two. And they wouldn't define the rest of your life anymore. Right? But you don't want to go through them. You don't want to have the gut-wrenching sadness that's going to come with them. You don't want to go through them, so instead you'd rather get angry or have your addictions. And all you're doing at the moment is meeting your addiction until it hurts too much, and then just getting angry because the addiction didn't work. And then you go back to another relationship, meet the addiction until it hurts too much. And then you just, after that, leave the relationship and get angry because it didn't work. And then you go to another relationship, meet the addiction until it hurts too much, and then go back to the anger when it didn't work. And this is the cycle you're in. Meeting the addiction till it hurts too much for Paul to handle, and then going back to anger because meeting the addiction didn't get the result you wanted. Right? Now that is not going to change anything. What's going to change something is, like Mary said, ask, why do I want this addiction so much? What's the purpose of this addiction? You start to look at more deeply at whether it's actually bringing you the benefits you believe it is. That's the kind of thing you need to look at. Make sense? Oh, yeah. And what I'm saying to you applies to most people who have heard divine truth. There's this very strong idea of like, I need to feel my feelings, so I need to feel my anger. And I'm going, well, if your anger is just a creation in order to avoid the truth, which is of what your addiction is, then why bother feeling your anger? Like, it's not going to get you anywhere. You're just going to be angry the rest of your life and still not know anything about yourself. You're going to have to get under it by not trying to dive under it, but actually feeling the rage that's in you and why it's there. It's there to help you overcome some other feeling that you don't want to have. That's why it's there. The anger is there to stop you from feeling the other feeling you don't want to feel. That's why it's there. Right? So what's the feelings you don't want to feel? And your conviction about those feelings is that they're too hard to feel. It's too hard to go there. It's bad to go there. And none of that is true. They're all just false beliefs that you want to hold on to support the addiction continuing. But at some point, Paul's going to say, well, I've tried this in the last 15 years, you've tried it 3 times in a row from what I've observed, and it hasn't worked so far. How many more times does Paul need to try the same thing until Paul realises what he's doing doesn't work? That's the weird question, isn't it? Because you could do it another 20 times. Or this could be your last time, and you start looking at what is the reason for the rage and the reason for the addiction. Because the reason for the rage is the same reason for the addiction. There is something driving the need for the addiction, and then when the addiction doesn't get met, the rage. And that thing is not the thing, you're not addressing that emotionally, you're not feeling that emotionally. Make sense?
Does that make sense?
I'm a little bit confused because I told you once that I had an experience with my daughter when I was going to see her.
Yeah.
That I felt like I wasn't going to put stuff on her anymore.
Yep.
And I had that conviction.
Yep.
Living myself, and it was painful, but it was
Yep.
really good. It was really beneficial.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of place where I've been going back to emotionally, and then like at times feeling like quite bad about myself, and really sort of that feels appropriate, and it feels.
Well, Paul, you do it your way and see how you go.
So that's my question. Yeah.
I think that's your way, but you know, I don't think it's going to get you much direction.
Yeah.
It's you want to tell yourself that you deal with things without actually going through the hard emotion. What you believe currently is a hard emotion is just a dribble. Do you understand what I mean?
I think so.
It's just a dribble.
Yeah.
Versus like
Yes.
Yeah. When you continually sort of making that decision, like I'm not going to meet my addiction in this situation.
It's an intellectual
totally
kind of thing. You have a dribble of emotion. That's not the same as really like engaging in a process where you come to terms with your will, desire to engage the addiction, and why, and feeling why.
Not just that. It's not the same as even just having the real emotion. Like,
You can't
the
get
thing
to
that's
it.
going to heal you is the real emotion being had. Whenever you use your mind to say, I'm not going to do that anymore, and then you do not do it anymore, you've not had the emotion.
Yeah.
You've had a change of heart in the sense that you don't want to do it anymore. But often I see you doing the exact thing with women that you say you're not doing to your daughter anymore.
Yeah.
And so that hasn't changed you in that regard. You're still doing the same thing to your daughter, by the way,
Yes.
as what you say or claim that you're not doing.
Well, I only didn't do it for that one weekend and then resorted back just to being the same.
So doesn't that teach you? It's not economical. It didn't work.
It didn't work.
No, it's not lasting.
No.
But you want to keep saying, but I don't understand, and so this is the issue that I have with these discussions with you, is that you want to keep saying that you don't understand, but I'm quite plain what I'm saying to you is that what you're doing is not going to work, and you're quite plain telling me that it is going to one day. And that's why I said just earlier, well then you just keep doing how you're currently going, and we'll see in 20 years' time whether it's worked or not. But is that how you want to play it, given the fact that the last 15 years has demonstrated it hasn't? It really gets down to your stubbornness now, doesn't it? Like, at the end of the day, your conviction that you're right versus somebody else saying, no, Paul, you're wrong.
Well,
Does that make sense?
well, I know I'm not doing it right because I'm not getting far. But
Well, no, you know you're not getting far, but you think you're doing it right. So what's the reason why you're not getting far according to you?
well, I think that because I'm trying to willpower it and not be honest with myself and go through the struggle of I don't really want to do this because of the pain or because of the reasons why I don't really want to.
Right? But how has that helped you?
Well, I'm saying that's not what I've been doing. That's what I'm going to take away from today. Yeah.
This is what I'm saying
Yes.
to you. If you look at it honestly, everything I've said to you up until today, for the last 15 years, you fundamentally, and this is what happens with many people listening to Divine Truth, they fundamentally believe that I am substantially wrong with what I'm teaching. No, I'm honest about this. Most of you think this way. You think, and many men in particular think this, by the way, that I am substantially don't know what I'm talking about, and that you know better the way to do it. And I'm saying to you, well, is your way for the last 15 years worked for you? And if it hasn't worked for you, then maybe your way isn't as good as you think, right? And maybe you should consider some other way, and particularly consider that the person teaching you divine truth is telling you your way doesn't work. Many of you do not have the humility to even accept somebody telling you that. Many of you are so convinced that your way will work as long as you do more of it somehow, or change it a bit here or change it a bit there. Eventually it will work. And I'm saying, no, it's never going to work. And the average person goes, yes, it is. It's my way. Of course it will work eventually. You know? It's substantially a lack of humility to listen to somebody who's demonstrated to you how it actually works. Right? And most people don't want to see that. Most of you have such condescension towards how to actually do it that you don't even want to do it. Like when I say condescension, you are literally feeling a state of how stupid is it to do that? Like what AJ is suggesting, what Jesus is suggesting, how stupid is his suggestions? So you'll listen to me about divine truth, you'll listen to me about the spirit world, you'll listen to me about how God feels about you, you'll listen to me about all these different things, but you will not listen to me about you. About you. And yet the very thing you need to listen to me about is you. Because without you coming to know about you, you will not be able to practice anything to do with God's truth ever in your entire life, in your whole future. Unless you listen to somebody about you in terms of how you are compared to the laws that we're living by, that God created you to live by. Right? And many of you are so stubborn, like incredibly stubborn about listening to the very person who's teaching you because you want to believe that your interpretation of what I'm teaching you is more accurate than what I'm saying. Right? And it's pretty off, to be honest. It's pretty off. And this is why Mary and I sort of feel like, man, when is this sincerity going to change? Right, where you actually are humble enough to accept that the person who's taught you divine truth actually does know your condition and actually does know how to get you out of it. When are you going to have that trust of your teacher? Now, at some point, and it might not be me, see, in the future, if you do not listen to me about this now, you'll pass, and in your passing, you will meet up with other people who want to help you, and they will eventually say exactly the same thing that I'm saying to you. And you will go, but I've heard all that before.
Oh, when did I hear that?
I heard that from that Jesus character, right? And I didn't agree with him then, and I don't agree with you now. And you'll end up in the same place where you just won't listen to people for years on end until the pain and suffering of all of the not listening catches up with you, and then you might listen. But you can change that now. You don't have to wait until then. You've got opportunities now, right? And this is what I notice is that many people are doing. Many people are going, oh, but he doesn't really get me. He doesn't really understand me. He doesn't really understand how sincere I am. I'm so sincere. And he doesn't really get it, you know. I'm sure he knows a lot about God and a lot about truth, but he doesn't understand me at all, is what the average one of you believe. And it's not true. But you can believe it if you want to.
So this is things which I tell myself about to avoid emotion and to stay in my addiction and stuff like that.
You know, the amount of times I have heard from people say to me and email me things like, you know, you're not at one with God yet, so what do you know really? Right? That's what they say to me. I go, well, the fact that I've been teaching you divine truth for free for 18 years or 20 years or whatever it is now, so 2004, 20 years, and publicly should at least demonstrate that I know what I'm talking about, maybe, and I'm consistent with it all the entire time. I haven't changed the fundamental teachings in any way whatsoever. And the fact is that the fact that I can do it myself would tend to indicate that perhaps, even though I'm not yet at one with God again or whatever, that I perhaps still know more than you do about it. Right? And if I do, and you trusted that, and the people who do trust that progress. The people who don't trust that never progress. Right? And that's why I said in the first century, if you can't accept me, you're not going to accept my Father who sent me. Right? If you can't accept me, you're not going to accept my Father who sent me. And this is a fact. Like, until you recognise the people who can help you, and until you stop believing that your own assessment is the more accurate of the two assessments, substantially no change will be made.
The more you progress, the more you realise your own assessment of things is just worthless because it's driven by sin. And even as you're getting out of sin, you're like, well, God's assessment is far more accurate. Even as I'm getting out of sin, God's opinion is far more accurate and not clouded by my own sinful desires, my own addictions, my own just pet things, you know. You see the gift that it is when somebody can tell you, hey, this thing right here that you cherish is the thing that's causing you pain. Like, that is a massive gift.
Yeah. It's the people who trust that progress the fastest on earth and in the spirit world. And so at some point, you've got to get beyond your own opinion of yourself and start to be able to accept God's opinion of you. And the majority of people on earth maintain their own opinion of themselves until they pass. And this is why very few people, by the time I passed in the first century, there were 500 people who would even listen. You know? And that was after 3 years of me being at one with God. talking to tens of thousands of people. There were 500 people who would even listen. Why is that? It's because the average person believes their own assessment of everything is the most accurate, including their own assessment of themselves. That's why. If you can see beyond that, you will progress much more rapidly. You can't see where you're at without external assistance. In the Paget messages, we said that very clearly. If you'll read in the Paget messages, if you read them carefully, you will see that we said, nobody progresses without external assistance, from truth coming from an outside source. Where you are is this level of water. For more truth to enter you, the level of water has to be higher than the level of water you're in, doesn't it? Right? For water to flow in that direction towards yourself, you have to be lower than where the water's coming from. Right? So if you believe yourself to be higher than where the truth is coming from, God, or from people who have got a connection with God, and you believe your version of truth is higher, this water, which you believe is here, how's it going to enter you when you think you're here? It's not going to touch you. Not going to touch you. And so that's the fundamental principle. Nothing can flow higher than its source. And if the source is you, then you are where you currently are, and therefore there is no higher source than you. And so how are you going to get into a higher place when there's no higher source than you?
So it's an arrogant attitude.
It is.
Yes.
Extremely so.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's the main reason that causes most people not to progress. Right? And until you can be humble enough to go, I need some help and assistance from outside of myself, and I need to listen to that and apply it, that is the only way I'm going to progress. Then you start going, oh, my opinions of myself don't matter so much. What matters more is that I correctly assess that the person who I'm trying to get assistance from is in a condition where I can get assistance from them. Because if they're in a person in a worse place than you, there's not much point doing that. But if they're in a better place than you, then there's point to it. And God is in the best place, right? Infinitely better. So obviously the primary source should be God. And then listen to all of God's truths, listen to God's principles. Like, whether you agree with them or not, who cares? What matters is that you listen to them and you work out why you don't agree. Right? Because all of God's principles are true because they're God's. And all of yours could be true or false, but mostly false probably, given the fact that you're not with God. Right? So listen to God. And if you can't listen to God, at least find somebody who is listening to God that you can listen to them. Do you know what I mean? You're going to have to work out one way or other who that is, but at least do that. Right? But if you're just listening to yourself all the time, you'll convince yourself of everything.
Yeah, and you're just on a merry-go-round, aren't you?
Yes.
It's just everything's the same.
And this is the
Every year's
avoidance of emotion.
Yeah, every year's going to be the same. You're going to have the same experiences every year, no change every year, same experiences every year, because substantially the only way to grow is for you to absorb a truth external from yourself that's higher than the truth you already have. That's the only way you can grow. There is no other way to grow. You have to accept the truth higher than yourself from an external source to grow. There's no other way to grow. Yeah, if you just listen to yourself, you will never grow. Until you have to get truth from an outside source. There is no way you'll ever grow without it. And this is something we said quite clearly in the Paget messages, but something that almost everybody doesn't honour. You know, the amount of emails I get from young men in particular telling me how wrong I am on everything, it's like, I don't know, probably 15 to 20 a week on the average. There were times when I would try to respond, and go, what's the point of responding to somebody who already thinks they know more than I do? Right? I'm teaching divine truth. I'm the first person who ever taught divine truth on this planet. And if you think you know more than me about it, well, good luck to you. I would like to know it if you did, but what I observed is all these people who think they know more, they don't demonstrate a life that they know more. So, right? But it's not about what I know. What it's about is the fact that if you honour your teacher, you will at least honour his assessment of where you're at. Wouldn't you? At least that. Like if you went to a university and you went to a 4-year course in university, let's say it was engineering, and every time you go to a course there's a grade you get, and your engineer's professor is going, right, yes, you've learnt structural engineering, design of trusses. Yes, you've learnt that, but you only got a B because you didn't get everything right. And you say, how dare you give me a B? I deserve an A++++, because I reckon I got everything right. And he says to you, look, you got all these answers wrong. No, I didn't. I got them right. This is what many of you are like with me. No, I didn't. I'm getting it right. You're teaching. I understand what you're teaching. I said, no, you don't. No, yes, I do. I get it. And I said, no, you don't. Not yet. And you say, yes, I do. And I go, well, what can I do then? It's like you being at a university lecturer, and the lecturer is saying you didn't get it, you got a B or a C, and you're saying you got an A. What are you going to do with that? Like, he gave you a C. What are you going to do?
I'm not going to get you to build my bridge, that's for sure.
And this is what we do to avoid emotion and avoid actually doing it.
Yeah, there's a lot of things we avoid. You could say you do it to avoid your own pain and your own painful emotion, couldn't you? You could also say you do it to avoid, like I know talking to me, you don't get many of your addictions met, right? I know that. So you do it, you ignore me so that you get addictions met from somewhere else, and that you're never confronted with what those addictions are. That's one way you do it too, one reason why you do it too. Another reason is because you want to believe that you know better than anyone around you. And it's just a substantial thing that many men in particular on the planet want to believe. And so you want to do it for that reason. You want to do it also because change is required when you start realising things. And many of you don't want to change your life. You think you're quite happy with your life. I can tell you, most of you are extremely unhappy, and yet you believe you're happy. And so you do it because you don't want change. Many of you do it because you don't want to get attacked. You see how much I get attacked, and it's a lot, right? We get attacked a lot. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes where we get attacked all the time. And you don't want to be attacked as much as we are, right? So you do it for that reason. You don't like confrontation. You do it for that reason. And you know that if you uphold God's truth in certain circumstances, there will be confrontation. And and you don't want confrontation, so you don't uphold the truth. So you do it for that reason. Many of you do it because you like the addictive relationships you're in, because you don't want to change them. You don't want to have to leave them. You don't want the confrontation of having to be alone for a while, working out some things. So instead you'd prefer to stay in a relationship even though it's not really working. And also out of harmony with God's principles. Many of you are scared of your family. You're scared of what they think of you and what they feel about you and what they're going to do when you actually practice God's truth. There are so many justifications the average person has for not doing it. But none of them are valid. They're just fears that you have that are causing a false reality in your life. What we have on earth here is an illusion because it's been created by people. Like the very land we live on is in an illusion at the moment because it was created and destroyed by people. There's people who eat meat, and there's people who want all these things from the land and want to destroy the land, and they don't care about the native parts of the land at all. And they've created this land that looks relatively nice, let's say, but it's not what God created. It's a complete different reality. And most of us are content to stay in it, unfortunately. And that's why there's the fifth sphere, and the fourth sphere, and the third sphere, and the second sphere, and the first sphere, and then the hells of the first sphere, because each of us have a different contentment of a different reality that are not God's version of what's love. And we're happy to live in them. In fact, we're the most content when we live in them, unfortunately. That's why they exist. They were created by our very soul in order to be the most comfortable with where we are, you know. And what we have here on earth is what most people on earth are the most comfortable with.
And sort of what I think is that I'm confused about the way and not sure about the next step and that, and I think that's more avoidance of really going there.
Yeah. And in fact, a lot of times when you say you're confused, you're really projecting at me saying, I haven't taught you well enough for you to understand yet what the way is. And I get that a lot from men, you know, particularly men, where they're constantly saying to me, I don't really get it, I think what you're explaining is not really true, and so forth. And it's not true. The truth is, I do know the way, and I have taught it relatively well, considering
I think you've
the resistance.
fairly comprehensively
Right.
come at it from many angles.
Yeah.
The same content.
The same, but the average person still wants to believe that they don't really get it, rather than actually putting into practice the things they do get.
Just even the first things. The first things most
like,
people don't want to do.
let's say tell the truth every single moment. Let's try that one. The average person doesn't want to do that. They don't. The average person wants to withhold the truth whenever they can.
And instead feel like I don't get it, or there's other reasons why not to go there.
Yeah, or, you know, why don't I tell my truth to the family, my friends? Why don't I say the truth to the government? Why don't I, you know, why don't I do all those things? It's all too hard. It's not, but it's quite clear what saying the truth means. It's not like, the truth is truth, honesty, openness, transparency. That's what you be with all people, right? So it's quite clear what it is, but the average person goes, but I don't want to do that. If I do that, there'll be changes I don't like in my life, you know? Not understanding that those changes will be good, you know, because we'd have no faith that they're good. Because the world has no faith it's good. We have no faith it's good, and so we just don't do it. Yeah. And this is the trouble, is that we end up in these states where we're convincing ourselves that the problem is our understanding, or the problem is our, you know, that it's too hard, or the problem, it's not hard. God designed you to be in a sixth sphere state. He actually created you in that state right from the beginning. He designed that to be the easiest state of your life. Anything less than that is a harder state to live in. He designed it for you. It's like, so you convincing yourself that it's too hard is just an illusion you're convincing yourself of, right? Because the reality is God made it sixth sphere state is where you're meant to be. But the average one of us wants to tell ourselves that, you know, the whole reason why we've got pain and suffering is not our fault. It's not our fault. It's God's fault. Or if God exists at all, it's God's fault if God exists. And if God doesn't exist, it's some magical thing that's happened in the universe, like, you know, nature is fundamentally angry with us. This is what the average person who doesn't believe in God believes. You know, this is a dangerous world we live in. Is the average thing the average person would like to believe, if they don't believe in God. If they believe in God, they believe God's punishing them. You know, God's causing trouble for them. You know, not understanding we cause our own. Yeah. And fundamentally, our arrogance is one of the major causes of our own trouble. Which, if you think about it, is the very first injury, as I mentioned to Jen earlier. The very first injury being that I wish to believe that I am God. I know best. I know how to live my life better than anybody else, including God. That's fundamentally the reason why we have the problems we have. So you've heard Jesus just rave on for a half an hour about that. It's a huge thing, Paul, because what I see when we travel a lot, Mary and I, as we're travelling around, we've been seeing the average person comes to one of our seminars in such extreme arrogance that they're unable to even grasp the fundamental principles of God's truth because of the extreme arrogance they hold about their own knowledge and their own place, their own state. Just extremely arrogant. And you can understand why the average person does not have a relationship with God. You know? And all we can do is be really firm with you all about it. All we can do is just say, you are not getting what we're saying to you. That's all. What else can we say? Like, we're like university lecturers are saying, you don't get the engineering thing I just taught you. You know? That's all we can do. What else can we do? If we can't convince you that you don't get it, then are you going to change? While you believe you do get it when you don't. Like, it's just not going to work, right?
And you'll end up blaming God's truth, saying that it doesn't work, thinking that you're doing it.
And sort of thinking that I'm doing it my way, God's way.
Yeah.
Sort of.
But my way.
But my flavour of God's way.
That's right.
My
Yeah.
unique alteration of God's way that
Yeah.
should work.
Yeah.
And thinking that I'm a bit lost in it, but that's more because I don't really want to go at it, I think.
Yeah. It's like God's truth a child can understand. So, you know, I have actually taught children, you know, particularly in the first century, we had to, like when I first met like Luke, he was like 6 years old, and he heard divine truth and loved it. Like, you know, a child can grasp it if they want to. If a person doesn't want to grasp it, you can span him. Literally 20 years. And they still won't grasp it. Right? And this is why, if you notice what we did in the Paget messages, whenever we went to a person who didn't want to listen, how long did we speak? You know, one of them who later listened to one of his friends rather than myself, he said, Jesus just turned away and went off because I couldn't understand what he was saying to me. Right? What else can you do? If the person believes themselves to be right and believes themselves to know when they don't, all you can say is you don't know and I've got to go. And with him, with this man, Nathan Plummer, I think his name was, he, you know, eventually listened to his friend Ned on Earth, you know, Paget on Earth. And then he made some changes, but he wouldn't listen to me. He said actually that I can't even recognise that he's Jesus. I don't know what anybody sees. That's what he said. Which is what the average one of you say about me, right? Yeah. Can't even recognise. Right? And you won't be able to until you've received some of God's love and you've received some of God's truth and you've actually in a humble state where you can see what you don't know as well as see that most of what you think you know, you don't really know. You know? Make sense? Yeah. Then did you want
So, I don't know if it's relevant, but just you and your identity, and you just mentioned it then, and I thought, how many people in this room do you actually believe you being Jesus? Is that something that affects you, even though they call you Jesus? Like, do they truly feel in their heart that you are?
Yeah, maybe 2 or 3.
And how does that feel for you to
It doesn't worry me. I know who I am. What concerns me more is that you don't understand that even though you've been listening to me for many, many, many years, many of you are still not listening. Like, I don't understand why you come along and listen to somebody and then don't do what he suggests. Like, if you went to a doctor, like you go to a doctor and you say to the doctor, look, I've got this problem with my leg. I see this sort of thing happening where I've got this thing travelling up my leg, you know, inside my leg, you know, this thing, like what appears to be a growth. It's probably an infection, right? Coming up my leg, and you take it to the doctor and he says, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some antibiotics, right? And you're going to have to take those antibiotics for 14 days. And you've got to notice what's happening to your leg, and if it goes away, then we know we're on the right track, right? And you say to him, I think you're an idiot.
But you go back next week.
Yeah. I think you're an idiot. I think I'm not going to do that. Or you say to him, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And then you go away and go, I think he's an idiot, right? And so you don't do it. And then the growth is up to here by the time you come back 2 weeks later, right? And you're saying, doctor, it's getting worse. And he says, did you take your medicine? And you say, no. And he's going, well, of course it got worse. You didn't take your medicine, right? You didn't deal with the problem, at least the way he suggested to. And then, let's say, he said, look, you take medicine, it will get better. And you go away and say, I still think he's an idiot. No, I don't want to take the medicine. Now, if you're not careful, he's going to have to amputate your leg the way you're going, right? In other words, each time you avoid a truthful reality in your own life, the next time is going to be harder on you every time you avoid something, right? So what I notice is a person comes with problems, listens to divine truth generally, coming with problems, and suggestions are made. Most people avoid those suggestions because they believe their own assessment is much more accurate, right? So they avoid the reality. What happens the next time is the reality is worse, right? And worse and worse, until the point that your whole soul's reality is so bad that you get so much pain and suffering, you can barely even hear a person talk to you about how to fix it, right? But it could have all been stopped many years prior just by listening and applying the remedy. And this is what I notice about many people listening to divine truth, is that the majority of people are not willing to listen and apply the remedy, and they use my condition or my, claim of being Jesus as the reason to not apply it. It's not a very good thing to do.
And also it's a little bit mystifying that people keep coming back. They are very arrogant and they use those things as an excuse, but then they keep coming back. So
yeah, so with you, Paul, you keep coming back to listen to what I say, but you never apply what I say. And then, so it's not going to benefit you because it's never getting applied. Now, what I would do if I was you is I'd look quite strongly at why it's not getting applied. There's a lot of fear you have about all sorts of things not happening the way you want them to happen if you apply it, right? You're afraid that if you don't work like you work, then you won't get the worth you get. You're afraid that if you don't enter the relationships you enter, that eventually you'll have no relationship and that'll be the end of it, and you won't have any sex or life or joy or romance in your life. The opposite is actually true, but you don't believe that at this stage, right? And this is where we hold on to our own concept so strongly that we can't accept what's being said to us. Yeah.
And you're not the only one in the room in that state.
No, not at all. It's like you're the only one who's willing to talk about it with me.
Yeah.
Which is better than not talking about it, right? Yeah. But the reality is the average person who listens doesn't really listen. They just hear. The words are going in their ears, but even then, many of you know that you can hardly even hear them. You know, don't you find that? Like, you listen to a recording that you made and you go, I didn't hear him say that, or that, or that, or that, or that. You know, this is how we are. We're so shut down internally to truth that we can barely even hear it, let alone listen and apply it, right? And it's good for us to know that about ourselves. Because if you know that about yourself, you can do something about it. So what you'll notice is Mary and I are going to get firmer and firmer and firmer with you about these things, right? Because what we notice happening is that people say they want to hear, but not apply. And in the end, it's pointless you spending your time hearing but not applying.
We're wasting everybody's time, aren't we?
Yeah. Mary and I might as well go have a nice quiet time, day to ourselves in our bedroom and with you.
And not with you there.
You know, then have a bunch of people here, 35 people in our house not listening. Hearing but not listening. Yeah. Hearing but not doing. Now, I'm not saying all of you are in that state, because some of you are doing, right? And those of you who are doing are receiving some of the benefits of doing. Yeah. And of course, as you progress more and more, that will increase more and more too. So not all of you are not in the same state, so it's not right for all of you to believe you are. But it's very important to see that many of you do have this attitude that you know better than the person who's teaching you. Now, if you arrive in the spirit world with that attitude, you will never progress beyond the point you arrive, if you believe that. Because it's only by listening to the truth outside of yourself that you will progress beyond the point where you arrive. That's a logical fact. It's logical as well as a fact. And this is very important to understand, very important to grasp, very important for each of you to face. Your own conception of yourself is sometimes the biggest problem you face. You know, I've sat down with many, many people, even in the last 20 years, trying to explain to them how their own conception of themselves is completely false. And I've barely had any single person listen. I've had so many discussions, many of them recorded actually, and yet nobody listened. Right? Until you come to terms with the truth of how you are in comparison with the truth that's external, progress can't be made. And what I mean by that is that, there's this beautiful external truth, but until you make it yours, progress cannot be made. Until it's in your heart, progress cannot be made. And it's so important to see that. So yes, Linda, people use my identity as an excuse to not listen. People use my claimed identity as a justification for, thinking that I'm an idiot whenever I say something to them personally about their condition. But interestingly enough, many of them come along regularly to some kind of presentation, but when I say something to them personally about their own condition, it's completely the opposite in that, they'll listen to the external truths, but they won't listen about how they can get it inside of themselves. They just won't listen about it. Now, even Mary has had the same difficulty, I must point out.
Totally.
Where it's been like fight the fight, fight the fight, fight the fight, fight, justify. You don't see me right. You don't see the correct or whatever.
This is why I'm so passionate with you guys about your own image of yourself, how important it is to give that up, because, oh man, I was so kind of certain of my image of myself, and it was damaging me, it was hurting me, this idea of who I thought I was, and keeping me from truth, but gee, I fought for it.
Mm-hmm.
I fought for it.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
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 And, you know,
Changed.
with me, I've had to come to terms with my own image of myself too. But the difference is between myself and yourselves is I don't fight for it anywhere near the amount that you guys do. You guys just are so intense with your fight about it. With me, it's sort of like, okay, that's pretty hard to handle, I'll go and cry about that. And then it's sort of done. But with you guys, it's like, let's have a good like, bash up about it first for years and years and years. And then I'll have a cry and then it's done.
And
That's how it is for many of you, right?
you come to regret that so much, you know, the time wasted in just pointless fight
Yeah.
for illusion, fighting for untruth.
And the real way to progress is to reduce the desire to fight as much as possible. Like, you know, that's, get over your desire to fight as much as you possibly can. Like, of course there's been times when I want to fight, but like, you know, I fight for a maybe. Like the longest I think I've fought for is about a month. And it hurt so much that I decided I'm not doing it again. Like, you know, why? Why do it? It's,
Can I just add to your point? For a lot of you, I want to say, be honest that you're in the fight. Some of you are just kidding yourselves that you are doing this or that you want to do it, but you're fighting. And then get over your desire to fight. But acknowledge first that you got it. Like some of you, it's like trying to beat your head against a brick wall to even convince you that you're fighting, and then get over it. Yeah.
fighting doesn't get you anything but a longer sentence.
And waste
That's
your
true
time.
on earth,
Yeah,
as
it's
well
true
as
on
in
it.
the spirit world, isn't it? Like, if you imagine you went to the judge and you got up in court, and instead of saying, yes, I committed the crime, you said, no, I didn't do it, no, I didn't do it.
I'm
And
actually
there's all
an
this
excellent
evidence being presented, no, I didn't do that either, didn't do that either, no. And then you start yelling and screaming, how dare you, blah, 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 you yell, and do you reckon you're going to get a shorter sentence that way?
Get 5 more.
So it's the same principle when it comes to God's laws. You know, the more you fight them, the longer the sentence is. It doesn't make a lot of logical sense. And it's all just for the sake of upholding an image of yourself that wasn't real anyway. Like, what's the point of that?
Sometimes it feels hard to be in the world.
Sorry, put it.
Sometimes it feels hard to be in the world.
Yeah?
Like, I know you taught.
Well, the world makes it hard, Linda. I don't know if it's that hard to be in the world when you're actually in a state where you love. It's not that hard then. I don't find it hard to be in the world. I think the world tried to make my life hard, you know, many times. That often happens. You know, in our last trip it happened almost everywhere we went. You know, where somebody tried to make your life hard. But it doesn't mean that it is hard.
It sort of feels like this is the only real thing. Like,
Yeah, but it's not hard. See, it's hard to live the illusion. And I know in a world that's living in illusion, you living in truth seems hard. But it's actually, you look at everyone in the world, do they look like they're doing it easy? You know, coming up, there's going to probably, in the next 5 years, there's probably going to be wars, right?
Yeah.
You can see it
More
coming.
wars.
You can see it building.
There's already wars.
There's already wars, but I mean world wars. Like, it's pretty predictable, given you look at every world leader now is really, really darkly motivated, selfish, looking for power, glory, like it's inevitable that the world is going to enter this state, right? Right. So just because the world enters that state, does it mean you have to? Like, I don't think so.
And really what you're expressing, Linda, is just grief that everyone, that just needs, is ant-emotions, as we call it, that need to come out of you about some
Fitting in with the world.
fitting in or feeling lonely or something. Because when you're really in a state of love and truth, there's a strength there, you know.
Not only that, you know, there's millions of celestial spirits now. You'll have good company wherever you walk, if you have their company. You know, there was a time in my own progress in this life where I felt like I was alone. That's true. But after I got through those emotions, I realised I got a lot of friends, and they're good company. And so nowadays, we spend time with them every single day, you know, for hours at a time, in their good company. Like, a lot of what you worry about is not as real as you think it is.
Which is not to say you shouldn't have your grief.
I still need to have your grief, but the reason why you have grief is because the things you're grieving aren't actually real. If they were real, you'd be happy rather than grieving.
What do you mean not real? Like,
They're not real. They're not like
they really that,
they happen to you. Things happen to you, right?
yeah.
But they weren't real in the sense that they weren't what love is. They weren't what truth was. They were all error.
So you're grieving being alone in the world, but you already were alone. You know, you feel like being more truthful.
And by the way, you're not alone, ever.
I don't feel alone. I prefer to be alone, but that's just shutting down.
Yeah, that's just shutting down. But even then, it's like, you prefer to be alone, but even then you're not alone.
No.
Yeah, you're trying to avoid it. It's not alone, is it? Being the feeling of being unloved by others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perhaps,
Yeah.
But that's not true either. You're loved by God, and you're loved by all these our celestial spirits. Whenever they come around you, they'll love you for sure. You know, there's also other spirits who are not even celestial spirits that love you too. Right? But it's just there's not a lot of people on earth who love you, because most people on earth have a corrupt view of love, and so therefore you're not going to feel loved. Yeah.
But if you're preventing your change in order to avoid that feeling, then those people didn't love you anyway, because they would love you changing. You know, I can't. So can you explain it? You sort of a lot of times we make excuses for not progressing or not being truthful and not being ourselves in the world, because we think, oh, then I'll get attacked and no one will love me. But the reality is they already didn't love you. Mm-hmm. They didn't want you to be yourself. If they're going to react like that when you do step into more truthfulness, then they already didn't love you.
A person who truly loves you will be happy when you step into more truthfulness, won't they?
Well, the one that, yeah. Yeah.
One who truly loves
somebody and he says, I love you, but I don't feel it at all. But that's
Well,
just me looking at
You shut down your emotions, you're not going to feel much, right?
No, I don't. And I haven't for a long time, so.
Yeah, but so the answer to that one is to open up your emotions more, because then you might be able to feel what they actually feel. And if somebody does say they love you and you actually don't feel any love from them, then you'll know there wasn't any love there. But at the moment, you don't know the difference because you shut yourself down. Yeah? They're all. This is what I mean is that it's all an illusion in the sense that you're creating your own state that's saying this is real, but it's not real. Like many of you believe your pain is real, but it's not real. It's transient. It's not permanent. You can release it and it'll be gone. So it's not real. It's a temporary state. Right? It's not real in the sense that it's not permanent. It's not going to remain forever. Right? But a lot of your life at the moment is not real either. You're living an illusion. So a lot of your friends are not your friends because you've never been honest with them. And once you're honest with them, you'll find out who your friends are.
Yeah.
You know? You're only going to find out who your friends are when you're honest with everybody. Until then, you won't find out who your friends are. So I found out when I started being honest, at the time that I started being honest, I found out I had no friends. On earth, I had no friends. And then I started to think I had no friends at all. But there was a whole group of spirit people that I eventually connected to who were my friends, who were very happy with me in being in a state of more truth. Right? Again, it was all an illusion. It was all It was me just thinking there was no people who wanted truth. When there was plenty of people who wanted truth, I just couldn't see them. You know? This is what I mean, is that when I talk about a lot of your emotions not being real, a lot of you go, but they are real, they are real, they are real. I want them to stay real, I want them to stay real. They're not real, that you just need to go through them, and when they're gone, you go, why do I even worry about that for? Like, all I had to do was feel it and it was gone. No, but we can stay in that place where we hold on to them for years and years and centuries. I've seen millennia. You know, and you can use the excuse, oh, nobody loves me and nobody cares about me. There's people in the hells right now who have been there for 1,000 years who think nobody loves them. And they're willing to live in that illusion that nobody loves them for 1,000 years. Just because their opinion is more important than other people's. The same fundamental problem I was talking about before. Just because you want to hold on to the idea that your sadness is going to be never ending, and your sadness is just as bad as it could be, and your sadness is just your shame and your guilt and everything else that's so bad, it's so hard, you're never going to be able to cope with it. None of that is true. God designed you to cope with it, deal with it, feel it, end it. He designed you to work through all these things, right? But the average person on earth goes, not possible. And in your illusion that it's not possible, you create a different illusory life, which says these things are not possible. You know, so it's like what I see, you imagine yourself in a show, like, imagine you're in a TV show, and the TV show is you're living a life and yet it's not real. We watched this show the other day called Ascension. And these guys were meant to be in the middle of space, right? But actually it worked out that they were still on Earth. Right, but they all thought they were in space.
We were on the spoiler alert.
Sorry about that. Not that any of you wanted to waste your time watching it, but it's just an interesting concept, because that's what I see most people on Earth doing. They believe themselves having a real life, when it's a whole life that they're living as a real life is actually a complete lie and illusion. It's not real. Right? This is how most of us are on Earth, living this life on Earth, not facing reality. It's far better to face reality than live that. Yeah. Sorry about the plot spoil there.
Still work. It'll still work.
Was it worth our time?
Yeah, probably not.
But it's an interesting concept, because that's the reality that most of us are living right now. We think we're living our real life, and what we're living is a reality that we've constructed to meet our illusions. That's what we're living.
And then when some people have that illusion broken outside of their own free will choices, somebody else breaks the illusion for them, or some circumstance does. People think it's the end of their world,
And it is.
and it is in a good way. But most people think it's the worst thing that could possibly happen.
Yeah. Have you seen The Matrix, the movie The Matrix? Yeah, most of it. You know, it's the red pill, blue pill thing, isn't it? The illusory life was they were all in reality in cocoons in the movie, with pipes into them, and being fed information through their brain synapses, right, to create those reality that wasn't actually real. And that's fundamentally what we're doing to ourselves by living out of harmony with the law, out of harmony with God's law. We're creating an illusory life that we think is real and we believe is real, and we're living it as if it's real, but it's not real. And it's only truth that solves that problem. That comes from outside of yourself. That's the only thing that solves that problem. Many of you are busting, so we better let you have the lead.
It's 10 to 4. 10 to 5. Jesus really did go on.
I did. We won't be doing any channeling, obviously. And is this going to be the end of our...
Well, that's why I said the time.
Sure, so I'll just sit down for another 5 minutes. So,
hold it in.
for the sake of the video, that's probably the end of our discussion today. Yeah. But I'd just like you to think about what we talked about there. You know, try to face the things that you think are real, and like all of your sadness is not real. All of it is not real. It's created by illusions, lies. So unless you're going to have to feel it and work your way through it, but you'll end up at the end of it looking back on it and going, "Wow, I don't feel that anymore." So it wasn't real. It's just a temporary state. It's just not a permanent thing. Right? And it's the same with all of the emotions you will have that are negative at the moment. All of them will end up, you look back on them and you go, wow, why did I even stay in that place for such a long time? All I needed to do was feel it and it was gone. And it no longer was real for my life anymore. And yet while I hold on to it and while I try to keep it within me and fight for it and defend it and have an argument and a bitter, you know, many of you to the bitter end, like end of your life, you're going to have this argument. While I do that, I'm thinking it's all real. I'm fighting for this reality that, for some strange reason, and what it really boils down to a lot of times is that I want to believe that my reality is the reality. You know, in other words, I want to believe that I'm God and I create reality, which is the very first injury of the very first human couple. Like, I want to create and alter reality that I now live in and agree with. So just think about how you're doing that with your life. Every sadness you have, every anger you have, all of them, none of them are real in that none of them will remain with you if you progress. They're all transient, they'll all go away, so why not make them go away sooner rather than fighting for them? Yeah? So if you can take that with you and have a feel about that, maybe next week we just talk about that a bit. Yeah? What were your feelings about that? Someone telling you that all the sadness that you have, that you're going to have to feel, will end up not being as real as you think it is. For a lot of us, we want to hold on to it as if it's real because we've got all this nostalgia about it. Again, that's what defines me as a person. You know, keeping hold of all of these things, all of these experiences that I had that weren't even real, holding on to them is what made me me, and it's not.
If I let them go, how will there ever be justice for what happened?
Yeah. How can I ever make people pay for what they did to me? You know? It's just all... It is so far removed from reality that it's like 6th sphere is reality, let's say. 1st sphere, where we're living, not reality. It's a reality we've created, but it doesn't have to be the reality. Right? And it's only real as long as you want to hold on to it and make it real. That's how long it will be real for you. So there's people I know, like I've said, thousands of years in the hells of the spirit world because that's what they want to believe is real. They want that reality. And many of you sort of think, well, why would they want that? But that's what you're doing, so why do you want that? Is the real question. You know? So that's the question. That's your homework, eh? Why do you want your own reality? So I want to know next week from you why you want to hold on to your own reality rather than accept God's. that all right?
Yeah. It's usually a bunch of excuses.
You'll come up with a bunch of excuses, that's true. But it's important for you to know what your own excuses are, and it's important for you to also work out whether those excuses are worth the price. You know, like at some point you've got to balance it all up and say, is it worth me staying in this illusory state, or is it better if I go to the truth? You know, you remember in the Matrix there was that guy who wanted to go back to the illusory state. Yeah? Is that the kind of person you are? Because that's substantially what many choose, isn't it? They listen to divine truth for a while, and they hear it, and they're quite enthusiastic about hearing it, and then they love hearing it for a while, and then all of a sudden they get to the point where it's now triggering them in some emotional way, and now what do they want? They want. I've had people say to me, there's been many people who've emailed us and talked to us, said, I wished I'd never met you ever in my whole life. I wished I'd never heard the truth, because now that I've heard it, I can't unhear it, but I want to go back to the way I was living before, and I can't. They're so angry with us about it, right? Is that the kind of person you want to be? Is really the question, isn't it?
Some of you have been that person.
Some of you have tried that person for 10 years or more. Like, how long is it going to just be a cycle after cycle of that person? Or so, yeah, ask yourself the question, why do I want my own illusions? What do I believe I'm gaining, living in that state? All right, guys.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.
Sorry about the lecture.
Greatly. Well, where else are we going to hear?
I have more and more of these states, so I don't know how it's going to work out.
We're here for it, babe.
Yeah.
That's
I
right.
had one in Ireland as well, where I just went off and
I love that one.
yeah, I just went off, and half an hour later I came back and said, "What happened there?"
You were so passionate. Oh, like I said, I thought you were going to take off.
Yeah. But it's like the more and more I progress, the more I see how much everybody wants to hold on to the illusion, you know, the false beliefs. And it's really important just to be able to give them up. You want to give them up. You want to get to the stage inside of yourself where somebody presents you with the truth, and you just give up your false belief there and then.
Wow.
That would be the best, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Because you're going to progress very fast if you can do that.
Imagine the extra energy. You spend so much energy fighting for the fault.
Like, what I see is many of you want a battle, like you want a full-on world war about your feelings, you know, like first, about how bad they are and how hard they are and how difficult they are.
And everyone should know.
Nobody should have to feel what I have to feel. And, you know, you're in full-on, like,
Battle mode.
world war battle nuclear mode, like, trying to fight, you know, and why? All you're trying to do is fight God. And it's not going to work out that well. As it should already have been proven to you in the past, right? Yeah, it's not going to work out that well, but we for some reason believe it's going to work out. It's going to work out. I know.
It's a special case for me. It'll work for me.
I know better than God. It's going to work out.
Stupid.
And it's just so ludicrous that we even contemplate doing it. And yet, you know, it's going to take people on earth going, I have to give up my own illusions about myself first. And if I can do that and face the truth about myself, now I have the opportunity of God's truth entering my heart and therefore changing my whole life, right? But if I can't give up this illusion that I have about myself, how am I ever going to give up? Like my own injuries and my own emotions that are preventing me from being my true self, my true nature. It's just going to be impossible. Like, I'd love for many of you, like within a year or two's time, that you've given up so many of your illusions that you can accept truths being presented, and you can do it in such a way that if you need to cry, you just cry there and then, you know, and then once that's done, that's it, you've done, and you're now able to accept those truths, you know. That would be give up the battle, you know. Fundamentally, there's going to be a world war because each of you are in a world war already with your own selves. You know, you're allowing the sin to dominate your life.
And calling it
And
righteous.
calling it righteous. Yeah,
That's how world wars happen.
that's right. Yeah. All right, guys.
Love you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.